I need to write this down before it writes me. I stepped through the final door, expecting another hallway, another trick of geometry, the motel's stale carpet, the hum of a soda machine that shouldn't hum at 3 a.m. Instead, there was nothing. No walls, no ceiling, no floor I could name. Just a white that wasn't color so much as a decision not to have any. It felt like stepping into the space between a thought and the word for it. The door closed behind me without sound. When I turned, it wasn't there. Turning again didn't help. The world rotated without changing, like I was the center of a compass that had lost north. "Pixel?" I called. The name left my mouth and went out like breath on glass. A smudge, then no smudge. Pixel didn't answer. He didn't chirp or purr or do the little irritated trill that meant I was being slow. He was there a second earlier, warm weight curling around my ankle as I reached for the handle, then light touched him and he turned into it. I didn't see him vanish. I saw what was left when he was gone, a shape my mind kept trying to draw and kept failing. "Pixel," I said again, softer, like a prayer you're ashamed of. No echo. The echo was me, coming half a second late. I lifted one foot and pressed it forward. The white accepted it. Not ground, not air. The resistance of blank paper. I moved anyway. If I kept still, I felt the edges of myself blur. The white liked still things. Still things were easier to rewrite. On the third step, a pressure gathered behind my eyes. Not pain, something more clinical, a cursor blinking. Select all. The way you feel when a dentist touches a nerve that isn't pain yet, but knows how to be. Memories lined up like files. The neon sign, the supply closet. John Smith's polite dead smile. The girl in the white dress with the wrong shadow. The ice machine that froze the sound of my own breathing and played it back to me. The mirror that wrote on itself when I couldn't. All of it stood in a neat row, waiting for the delete key. I knew the shape of the key. I knew where it would be in this place, if keys existed here. In this place, they were decisions. I swallowed. My mouth tasted like an eraser. If I let it happen, it would be clean. No more fear, no more rules, no more nights that pretended to end and didn't. No more me, but maybe that was the point. Maybe that had always been the point. End the subject, reset the experiment, fabricate a new Michael Brennan from whatever noise was left. The idea came fully formed. It didn't feel like mine, which is how I knew they'd planted it. I kept walking. The pressure increased. The files trembled. One unlatched itself and slid toward the white. A tiny day from a small life. Me and Pixel on the third-floor steps, moving boxes, the cardboard soft from the rain that had just ended. I reached without thinking. I grabbed it. For a second, the world flickered. Suddenly, the stairwell smelled like damp. Concrete and the metal railing was cold under my hand, and Pixel's carrier thumped my hip, and I was so tired and stupidly hopeful it hurt. Then, the white reasserted itself, and the stairwell peeled away like a sticker. I held the memory until the trembling stopped. Then I put it back, not where it had been, where I wanted it, closer, warmer. The pressure noticed. It pushed harder. A voice I couldn't hear yet started talking like a TV in another room. My name flashed across the white in faint gray letters, too light for the eye, heavy for the mind. Michael Brennan. Subject M.B. The letters drifted, fell apart, joined other letters. The white was making sentences about me, the way you write a caption under a picture of a stranger. I dug my nails into my palms and counted each sting like a small revolt. I thought about the motel room key that was always a little too warm, the folding chair in the supply closet with the initials carved underneath, someone else's initials, not mine. The way the phone voice paused half a second too late, like it was playing back a recording of a pause. The notes on the bathroom mirror that showed up only when I was about to give up. Remember. Remember what? Not the past. Remember the refusal. Remember the point where refusing becomes remembering. Something brushed my shoulder. I spun and saw nothing. Or rather, I saw the negative of something. A gap in the white shaped like a person standing too close. It vanished before my fear could finish its shape. The white didn't just erase. It anticipated. It cut you off at the next thought. I crouched and put my palm flat against whatever held me up. Heat collected under my skin like ink warming in a bottle. I pictured the first time I saw Pixel, the shelter noise, the way he met my gaze like he'd been waiting. Another file tried to slip free. I pressed it down. My own voice, somewhere, was saying, "If you let them pick what you keep, you'll keep exactly what helps them and nothing else." "How do I fight a blank page?" I asked the white. It wasn't a question to it. It was a letter of intent. The white thickened, as if offended. A horizon appeared, not visible, but implied by the fatigue running through my legs. I walked toward it, and it walked toward me in that way horizons do. "Michael," a familiar cadence whispered, too far and too close. Pixel's name was in it, the shape of his small mouth forming vowels he didn't have. I almost ran toward the sound, which was the trap, so I didn't. I kept the pace of a man who knows he's being watched and refuses to give the watcher satisfaction. That's when I felt the other thing. Not pressure. Pull. A gentle tug on the thread tied to whatever lies behind your sternum. The white wanted me simple. This wanted me precise. It wanted the version of me that could make a sentence that hurt and healed at the same time. It wanted the version that had almost been a writer once, before fear learned his schedule. "Not yet," I told it. "I don't sign things I can't read." The pull paused. The pressure resumed. The files jittered like teeth in a cold mouth. I stopped walking. The white flowed past me like mist going somewhere else. I lifted my hands. They looked like hands that had learned every poor job a person could hold. Grease in the lines, a faint scar from a bottle that broke wrong, the tender pail at the base of the thumb where Pixel would butt his head when he needed me to come back to earth. I flexed them. The gesture felt like proof. "I know what this is," I said, and it was the smallest victory of my life. You don't erase, you overwrite. You keep the structure and swap the story. The white held very still, which was how I knew I was right. "Then hear this," I said, and pitched my voice like a wedge. "I am not a structure. I am the story." The temperature changed, not warmer, not colder, more specific. A brightness gathered ahead, not glare, definition. The blah of the white separating into layers the way foam separates back into water. I walked. I didn't look back. Something like floor became something like corridor, but only if you didn't stare too long. The brightness clarified. It was a doorway without edges, a door shaped by everything it wasn't. I knew its name without learning it. The final door had been a door. This was the step beyond. I stopped at the threshold formed by the absence of threshold. I waited for the next trick, the next rule, the next knife disguised as a kindness. None came. Only a voice, not from above or below or ahead, but from the exact middle of me, speaking in a tone I'd heard through phones and mirrors and through the eyes of men who lied for a living. It said, "Calm as an instruction, you give a child about crossing the street. This is where you choose not who you save, but what story survives." The white thinned into structure. Shelves rose out of the blank like ribs, endlessly. No ceiling, no lamps, yet there was light. Dust hung without falling. The air smelled like cold paper and something sweet, like glue that forgot it used to be a tree. Books filled every span of sight, not still books. Pages moved in them as if wind lived inside the covers. Some wrote themselves in tight black strokes. Some erased, a soft gray snowfall clearing lines that had just been born. Some overlapped, new sentences printing right over old, the text becoming a bruise. I stepped forward, and the nearest shelf exhaled. Letters crawled along a spine to face me. MB-178, next to it, MB-179, then MB-180. A run of them like a chant. Past that, the pattern broke. MC-001, MC-002, MD-014. Names disguised as initials, lives disguised as files. The catalog knew how to hide a person in 2 letters and a dash. I pulled one at random. The leather was warm, like a palm. It opened by itself, as if it had been waiting for my wrist bones. Words assembled as I watched, not ink, movement, like a school of tiny black fish deciding to be a sentence. Subject MC witnesses reflection speak first. Do not answer when the mirror asks your name. The page kept building. My mouth went dry. I closed the book. It kept writing under the cover. The whisper of nib on paper didn't stop. I put it back and my hand trembled like I'd done something intimate without consent. Who did this? I asked. The sound went out and tucked itself into the stacks. Libraries know how to keep quiet by eating questions. Far down the row a book coughed, a thin paper spit. I followed it. The shelf numbers never changed, yet the shelves did. Wood became metal, became something like bone. I didn't blink. Things here punished blinking. A small book had slid forward on its own. No code on the spine, no letters. I touched it. It opened to a picture drawn with words, a motel bedspread mapped in cheap constellations, a neon open sign buzzing like a fly, the glossy eye of a cat reflecting a color there wasn't a name for. Pixel. He hopped in a sloppy little loop, in the image, as if the text could feel 3 dimensions. He looked past me toward the door and chirped. My chest hurt. Then the image split with a crease and reformed. The cat dissolved into a filament and burned bright. The open sign took its place. The vowel in open lengthened. I could hear the hum. I could feel the heat on the glass when I pressed my forehead to it at 11:14 p.m., waiting to switch it off at 11:15, because Rule 1 said so in somebody's careful handwriting. Another fold. The neon died, and a mirror grew in its frame. Steam wrote on it. Remember Michael? My name left a drip, slid down, tried to become a new letter and failed. I flipped backward. The book refused. The sequence kept going. Neon to mirror to cat to a cheap desk lamp that flickered in a rhythm my pulse copied without asking. Anchor, the page whispered without using the word. Not a thing. A function. The shape that pulls a story tight, that holds you in place so the knife can be accurate. I turned the page and saw other hands, other apartments, other lives wearing my outline badly. A boy in a basement with a dog that stared at the wall and wagged at something no one else could see. A woman in a hospital gown tracing circles on the tile around the one white lily someone had left. A clerk in a highway toll booth who kept a gold coin on the ledge because it felt heavier than it should. In each life, the same presence with different clothes. Category, mirror, lamp, lily, coin, all of them pixel, spelled in materials instead of letters, a patient, tireless gravity. I shut the book. I kept my palm on the cover for a second like you do when you want to say I see you to a creature that doesn't love language. The warmth under the leather receded. The book lifted itself and slid back into place without help, like a good soldier. I hated how obedient everything was. On the next shelf, more spines. MB. MB, a litany. I pulled one at the beginning of a sequence because beginnings lie the least. Inside, a man who had my face but a different posture, straighter, like he hadn't learned yet that the world enjoys leaning on you. He worked nights in a parking garage. He liked the quiet until quiet started liking him back. His anchor was a camera no one admitted was there. It watched him when he slept in a chair he wasn't supposed to have. The rules were different, but the shape of them fit my teeth. I read until the lines began to overlap in my head, and I felt my own outline blur. I put the book away and pressed my knuckles to my sternum until the ache localized. I needed to keep a Michael-shaped space for myself. Okay, I said to the stacks. Okay, I get it. The library didn't nod. It didn't have to. The logic was simple once you surrendered to the cruelty. No one is special. You are a draft number, a version in a series. The experiment doesn't end. It iterates. A ladder wheeled itself to me. I hadn't asked for it. I climbed anyway. Higher, then higher, until the floor was a rumor. The air cooled. My breath fogged, and the fog printed faint words, little epigraphs that vanished before I could say them aloud. At the top of the ladder, a shelf ended in nothing and began again in nothing farther away. Between them, a gap like a swallowed breath. I reached across. My fingertips brushed a book, and it leapt into my arms like it wanted me specifically. My name grazed my mind before I saw the cover. Not my name. Our pattern. MB-241. It opened to a page already ruined by erasures. The margin was crowded with notes in several hands. Do not count the gates aloud. Lock yourself in the supply closet. If the phone rings after 3:12 a.m., let it. My stomach turned. The rules had moved from motel walls to this paper, like mold finding a new wall. Ink had bled through from the next page, a thin, tired script I knew. Remember. Remember what refused you. My own letters from nights I couldn't forget were bleeding backward into this draft like a warning sent upstream. I read the next lines anyway. Subject MB shows resistance to overwrite. Anchor fidelity high. Recommend escalation. I closed the book so gently I could hear my fingerprints stick. Someone below pushed the ladder. I felt the jolt, looked down. No one. Only the suspicion of a shape, blacker than shadow. The library was watching its browser. I climbed down. The floor returned under my shoes like a promise it didn't intend to keep. I let my hand drift along spines as I walked. M, C, M, D, M, F. How far did it go? How many alphabets do you need to file a species? At a junction, the shelves opened into a nave, the way a church decides to have space around the pane. A table stood in the middle, scarred, blotched with rings of old cups. On it lay a spread of slim volumes, not shelved yet, titles written in a hurry. I picked one up because it did not flinch when I reached. No. Code on the spine. No initials. Just a single embossed word on the cover I didn't know how to say. Inside, the map of my nights unfolded in symbols instead of sentences. A square for the motel. A little glaring circle for the neon. A slash mark for the supply closet door. A tiny 5-point star where Pixel had slept, moving from bed to sink to threshold like a guardian that wasn't allowed to tell you what it was guarding. Lines connected the symbols. Not straight lines, threads. They knotted in the same place every time. The knot had a color I felt in my teeth. Anchor. You were never just a cat, I whispered to whatever had been following me since I said yes to a job that smelled like mercy. You were the weight. Something shifted in the corner of the nave. A lamp blinked on with no bulb. The light made a soft gold triangle on the table, the exact shade of Pixel's irises when he saw me before I saw myself. I reached for it. The light hissed, a little warning, and went out. I smiled despite the cold crawling my back. Some rules are boundary markers. Some rules are love wearing a hard face. Pixel had always been both. There was motion above me. Not a person, not wind. A book dislodged somewhere high, somewhere old. It fell in silence, turning once, twice, the way a leaf pretends to be free. I stepped forward. It struck the table without sound. The impact puffed a circle of dust that smelled like long nights. It opened by itself. The first page was blank in a way that hurt. Then letters rose slowly from the paper, as if they were being remembered, not written. Michael Brennan, final draft. The library did not stay silent for long. Once the book with my name fell open, Michael Brennan, final draft, everything around me seemed to react like an exposed nerve. Shelves shook as though alive, covers split, and 1,000 pages tore themselves free, rushing into the air like a storm of pale moths. They didn't float gently. They swarmed, circling me, crowding every breath until the sound of paper wings became unbearable. I raised my arms to shield my face, but the storm wasn't interested in cutting me. It wanted to bind me. The first page struck my arm and clung to it. I ripped it away, but the words had already sunk deeper, bleeding into my skin like ink in water. My forearm burned, black letters unfurling across it in a line I knew by heart. Rule 1. Turn off the neon sign at 11:15. I staggered, horrified, but there was no pause. Another page slapped against my chest, searing through to my ribs with a new command. Rule 3. Do not answer the phone if it rings after 3:12 a.m. I tried to run, but more pages lashed at my face, my legs, my hands, each one seeping into me until I wasn't flesh anymore. I was a manuscript being rewritten, my body turning into a catalog of orders and memories I had lived, and others I hadn't. I stumbled blindly through the storm, feeling my outline blur. Paragraphs etched themselves into my back. Sentences wrapped my throat and muffled my words into silence. My mouth opened, but only fragments fell out, rules I'd never agreed to, words spoken by other voices wearing mine. I saw flashes from lives that weren't mine. Other MBs hollowed out, their eyes blank, their mouths muttering regulations on repeat. They were gone, overwritten completely, nothing more than obedient drafts waiting to be filed. For the first time, I understood what the library wanted. It wasn't recording us, it was consuming us, one subject at a time. I thought this was how it ended, that I would dissolve into another version, another set of initials bound and shelved. Then the storm flickered. A shimmer of gold slipped between the pages, thin at first, like sunlight trying to enter a room with no windows. The glow sharpened, scattering the black storm with every pulse, until it landed at my feet and gathered into a shape I knew better than anything in this world. Pixel. Not in fur and whiskers, not the warm weight curling on my lap, but something more fundamental. His body was molten script, golden ink flowing into the outline of a cat. His tail flicked like a brushstroke, every step rearranging the letters that formed him. His eyes burned with symbols older than rules, alive in a way the storm feared. For the first time in this nightmare, the words around me froze. He looked at me, and in his gaze I heard a voice I'd been imagining for years in every purr, every meow I pretended to translate. This time, it was real. "You are not here to obey the words," Pixel said. His tone was steady, almost tender, but it cut deeper than the commands etched into my skin. "You are here to write them." I wanted to believe him, but my body ached with laws branded into it. My chest carried orders, my arms held rules, my skin was nothing but parchment for the cycle. Yet something stirred beneath the ink, a memory not yet erased, a defiance that felt like mine alone. Pixel's golden form trembled, and a drop of his body fell, splashing onto the ground. From that shimmering ink rose an object so ordinary it felt impossible in this place. A pen. It was simple wood, plain, the kind you'd forget in a motel desk drawer. But when I reached for it, the pen throbbed in my palm like a living thing. My veins hummed in answer. The words burned into my arms, trembled, as if waiting for correction. I hadn't written anything in so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like, but now the storm itself seemed to pause, daring me to try. Pixel's voice came again, softer but urgent. "Try." He was fading, his golden ink dripping away into the white floor, his body collapsing under the strain. Only his eyes held steady, willing me forward. I lifted the pen. My hand shook, my arm burned, but I lowered the tip toward the scar etched into my skin. The first command glared at me, alive, refusing to let go. "Turn off the neon sign at 11:15. The pen touched, and the words hissed like iron in water. My whole arm convulsed, but I forced myself to write over the line, slow, deliberate. The letters resisted, but I pressed harder, each stroke burning like fire until the old ink dissolved beneath the new. By the time the sentence was finished, it no longer read as a rule. It read as something else entirely. Rule 1. Michael Brennan decides. The effect was instant. My arm glowed bright, and the rule shattered. Light exploded outward in a pulse that ripped through the air. The storm screamed as if wounded. Pages combusted mid-flight, turning into ash without flame. Shelves rattled and shook. The entire library seemed to quake in fury that I had dared to edit its design. When the glow faded, my arm was clear. My skin returned, untouched for the first time in what felt like years. The storm, furious, pressed closer, circling tight, throwing more pages at me in waves. New rules burned into my chest, my hands trying to chain me again, but something had changed. I had written back. I had stolen the pen from the cycle. Pixel was nearly gone. His form had shrunk to a thread of golden ink, his tail flickering like a dying candle. I looked at him and whispered through the chaos. "You're not just an anchor. You're the key." He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His body folded in on itself, collapsing into a single radiant symbol that floated above the pen. When it sank into the wood, the pen ignited in my grip, no longer simple. It was alive, burning with the same golden fire that had once been Pixel's eyes. The storm howled and closed in, determined to smother me beneath its endless words. Pages sliced the air, paragraphs screamed, rules tried to drown me in ink. But this time, I wasn't only a subject. I wasn't only a draft. For the first time, I held the power to write. And the library knew it. The moment the golden symbol fused with the pen, the library erupted in rage. The shelves groaned and split, their wooden spines bending backward until the books they held poured into the air like flocks of black birds. From the gaps in the shelves, shadows congealed into shapes that weren't quite human. They emerged slowly, as if carved from the very sentences they had erased. Cloaked in darkness, their faces were not faces at all, but shifting masks made of smudged type, whole paragraphs blacked out until only fragments showed. In their hands gleamed blades sharpened from fountain pens, tips dripping with wet ink that hissed when it struck the ground. These were not readers. They were editors. Their voices arrived all at once, echoing from 1,000 directions, though their mouths did not move. "No subject rewrites himself. You break the cycle. You break us." The sound rattled through my ribs, as if my bones were the tuning forks of their authority. I took a step back, but the storm of pages sealed every escape. The editors moved as one, circling with precision, blades poised to carve me back into silence. For a second, I felt the rules still burned into my chest twitch alive, ready to tighten around me like chains if I faltered. I gripped the pen harder. It vibrated in my hand, alive with the last spark of Pixel's golden ink. I didn't know what to write. My mind was blank, but the storm seemed to wait, sensing that hesitation. One editor lunged, its ink knife slashing through the air. I raised the pen without thinking and scrawled a word across nothing. The letter glowed, hung in the air, and solidified into a wall of light. The blade struck it and shattered into droplets of ink that sizzled on the floor. The editor reeled back, its cloak twisting into nonsense letters before reforming. For the first time, I realized every word I wrote could become real. The others rushed forward, blades slicing, pages shrieking. I staggered back and wrote again, faster this time. A single phrase, "Not today." The letters exploded outward, forming a burst of energy that sent 3 editors sprawling. Their cloaks tore apart, scattering into strings of punctuation that dissolved into ash. The library roared in protest, as though language itself resented being used against its guardians. I didn't have time to think. Each step became a sentence, each swing of my arm a paragraph. I wrote words into the air and they hardened into shields, twisted into blades of my own, or burst into light that carved paths through the dark. The editors adapted quickly, changing shape with every strike, their erased faces becoming new redactions, their knives extending like quills dipped forever in venom. For every one I repelled, another emerged from the shelves, climbing out of paragraphs that rewrote themselves on the spot. Still, the pen kept answering me. Pixel's glow spread each time I dared to write, as though his spirit was guiding the words through my trembling hand. The storm of pages shrieked louder, swirling into vortices that tried to drag me down. My arms ached, my chest burned with leftover rules, but I pressed on, scratching words into the air faster than I thought possible. Sentences turned into weapons, memory became ammunition, even pain became ink. One editor broke through, blade arcing toward my throat. In panic, I wrote the only thing that came to me. No. The word flared like lightning, knocking the creature back. It screamed without sound, a hollow roar of censorship, and collapsed into dripping blotches of black. But as it fell, the shelves themselves tore open, splitting wide to reveal a gash in reality. Through it, I saw something impossible, a window into another place. It wasn't the library, it wasn't the motel. It was a room I knew too well, a cheap apartment, a desk stacked with empty cans, a laptop glowing in the dim light. And sitting before it, hunched over with tired eyes, was me, Michael Brennan, not a subject, not rewritten, just a man staring at a blank document on the screen, fingers hovering over the keys as if he had forgotten how to begin. The sight stole my breath. The editors noticed too. Their voices deepened, resonating with fury. No subject rewrites himself. You fracture the draft. You fracture the world. They surged all at once, desperate to close the tear, their blades slashing with a speed I couldn't keep up with. I ducked, scrawling frantic lines across the air to shield myself, but my words were weaker now, my sentences breaking apart as if the library itself was draining their strength. I stared at the window again. My other self blinked, almost as if he could feel me watching. He reached toward the keyboard, and I realized the truth. The world outside wasn't gone. I was part of a draft inside a story he had abandoned. The motel, the rules, the endless cycle. All of it had been stitched from the fragments of his failure. And now, the editors would kill to keep him from finishing it. I clenched the pen, heart pounding. The storm pressed closer, the editors closing in with blades raised high. Pixels' glow flickered in the pen's barrel, dim but steady, as if whispering one last reminder. I raised it toward the gash in reality, ink spilling into the air. My words were barely audible over the storm, but they burned with everything I had left. You don't get to write me anymore. The letters flared, carving across the tear. The window widened, light spilling through, bright enough to blind the editors. They shrieked in unison, their redacted faces melting into static. The shelves collapsed inward, books tumbling into the void. For one suspended heartbeat, the library itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, the gash widened into a doorway, pulling me toward the world on the other side. I stumbled forward, the storm clawing at me, the editors lunging with what strength remained. Their blades sliced through sentences I barely managed to write in time. My lungs burned, my body ached, but the pull of the window was stronger. I reached out, stretching my arm toward the apartment, toward the version of myself that had never stepped into the motel. The editors screamed behind me, their chorus of rage collapsing into a single demand. Erase him. But it was too late. Through the tear in the library, I saw myself lift his head and meet my gaze. The window held. Even as the library convulsed and the editors screamed, the tear in reality widened into a frame of light that showed me the life I had almost forgotten. The apartment looked smaller than I remembered, cluttered and tired, but real. I saw the desk, the half-dead lamp, the crumpled takeout cartons, and the blank document glowing on the laptop screen. More than that, I saw myself hunched in the chair, eyes hollow, fingers hovering uselessly above the keys. It was like staring at the first draft of a man, a version of Michael Brennan that had never been pulled into the motel or rewritten into cycles. The editors surged again, their cloaks ripping into letters as they tried to stitch. The tear closed. Their knives dripped with black ink, slicing through the words I scribbled in defense. I stumbled back, the pen shaking in my hand, my sentences breaking apart as quickly as I wrote them. My heart hammered, not just with fear, but with the understanding of what this vision meant. The world outside wasn't some imagined dream. It was the original page, the one where I had once been free, the one I had abandoned when I signed a contract I barely remembered agreeing to. The truth spread through me like fire. I wasn't unique. I wasn't chosen. I was collateral in a story that had failed to finish itself. The motel, the rules, the endless nights, all of it had been stitched together by the bargain of a desperate writer. Me. I had sold my voice for the chance to matter, and they had taken it literally. They had turned me into a subject, a draft, trapped in a manuscript that was never meant to end. I clenched the pen tighter, watching the window flicker. The other me looked up, his face pale in the glow of the screen. Our eyes met. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the crushing weight of choice. This wasn't about survival anymore. It wasn't about resisting erasure. It was about deciding which story would outlast the others. The library was infinite, filled with endless rewrites and endless suffering, but the pen in my hand gave me the chance to stop it. Pixel's glow still lingered faintly in the barrel, golden threads swimming through the ink like veins of light. I remembered his voice, steady and unshaken even as he faded. "You are not here to obey the words. You are here to write them." The meaning struck me harder now than ever. I wasn't just a subject being tested. I was the author who had abandoned his own draft, condemned it to repeat itself until nothing remained but rules. I turned away from the window and looked back at the library. The editors swarmed, multiplying with every second, their erased faces multiplying like black mirrors. The shelves shivered, vomiting books into the air. Pages curled and twisted, trying to choke me with the same words I had already burned from my skin. All of them screamed for me to choose wrong, to choose silence, to keep the cycle turning. Two paths unfolded in my mind, as if the library itself was whispering them to me. The first, destroy everything. Burn the shelves, erase the archives, collapse the library into dust. If I chose that path, the cycle would end. The editors, the anchors, even Pixel, they would all dissolve into nothing, and maybe, just maybe, I would finally be free. The second, finish the story. Write the ending the library had denied me, close the draft, seal it forever so that no one else would be rewritten into its pages. But to do that, I would have to keep Pixel alive, keep the anchor bound, and in doing so, accept that my story would never truly belong only to me. I hesitated, the weight of the pen unbearable. I had lived so long with rules that every choice felt like a trap. Destroying the library meant obliterating everything I had known, even the fragments of love and fear that proved I was still human. Writing the ending meant living with the knowledge that I was only one version of many, a man whose life was stitched into the bones of countless failed drafts. My hands trembled, and every word I considered writing seemed to crack reality a little more. The window flickered. I saw the other me lean forward, fingers finally pressing keys. For a brief instant, the laptop screen filled with words. They were mine, sentences I had spoken, scenes I had endured. The world outside was not unaware. It was already writing me, whether I wanted it to or not. The thought chilled me, but it also gave me strength. If the page could take from me, then I could take from it. The editors screamed louder, sensing my hesitation. Their chorus grew deafening. "Choose! Choose! Choose!" They lunged together, blades raised high, black ink raining down like blood. I raised the pen, ready to end it all in one stroke. My mouth opened, whispering words that might have unmade the world. But then I felt it. The faintest weight against my wrist, a golden warmth curling like a paw. Pixel, not fully formed, not even visible, just the impression of him pressing gently against me. A reminder, an anchor. My chest ached. He had been with me in every draft, in every rewrite, not as a jailer, but as a thread tying me to the possibility of choice. To destroy him was to destroy that last trace of myself that had resisted. To save him was to admit that stories only survive when someone carries them forward. I raised the pen higher, the storm collapsing around me. I pressed the nib against the air, and the sentence began to form. The words glowed, binding themselves into reality as I wrote them. Michael Brennan remembers. The library shuddered, the shelves groaned, the editors shrieked as if the word itself was poison. The sentence spread like fire through the pages, branding itself into every draft, every name, every forgotten subject. The tear widened again, flooding the nave with white light. The editors dissolved into blotches, their blades falling as melted quills. The storm of pages burned into ash that snowed silently across the floor. The books on the shelves began to collapse into dust, one by one, until only silence remained. Pixel's glow flared inside the pen, stronger than ever, and for a moment I thought I had made the final choice. But then, as the last book fell and the window widened into a door of light, I saw something I hadn't written. The golden glow shifted, spilling onto the last page still in my hand. Pixel leapt from the pen, his body forming in ink and light, and pressed his paws onto the sentence. The words reshaped themselves, sealing not just my decision, but his. The story was no longer only mine. It was ours. The library dissolved around me. The editors were gone. The shelves collapsed into endless white, and still the final page glowed in my hands, stamped with a single line of golden ink, Michael Brennan, Final Draft. The words glowed brighter than fire. Michael Brennan remembers. I had written them with my own hand, and for a breathless moment, I believed that was enough. The shelves collapsed into themselves, the endless books disintegrated into dust, and the editors howled as they dissolved, their ink-stained blades melting into puddles of black. The library folded like paper, burning from the edges inward until nothing remained but a white horizon, and in my grip, a single page still alive with golden ink. The pen pulsed in my hand, hot, heavy, as if it carried all the weight of what I had chosen. Then the ground trembled beneath me. The white split opened like cracked porcelain, and light poured out, blinding, swallowing everything. I stumbled forward, clutching the page, clutching the pen, and fell headfirst into the fracture. For a moment there was nothing but rushing air, fragments of memory, shards of all the rules that had ever governed me. Lock the closet, do not answer, turn off the sign, splintering apart like glass around me. My body twisted as though I were being rewritten again, but this time not by force. This time it was the consequence of what I had dared to write. When I opened my eyes, the library was gone. The motel was gone. Even the white void was gone. I stood in a room I had never seen, but felt like I had been waiting for my whole life. It was too clean, too white, like standing inside a blank sheet of paper. The walls gleamed sterile under fluorescent lights. Machines hummed quietly, their blinking signals keeping rhythm like heartbeats. The air smelled of antiseptic, sharp and chemical, the smell of hospitals and laboratories. I turned, disoriented, and froze. They were there. A half circle of figures in lab coats, faces obscured by masks, clipboards in hand. Behind glass walls, rows of machines recorded lines of data, graphs that spiked in time with my pulse. The figures stared at me as though I were not a man but a specimen. Above them, a massive screen flickered, its letters stamped in the same black type I had seen across so many rules. Subject MB. Experiment complete. The words seared into me. 100 suspicions I had buried clawed to the surface. All the whispers on the phone, the voices saying, subject resists overwrite. The rules that felt less like hauntings and more like protocols. It had always been this. I wasn't haunted. I was studied. I wasn't surviving a cycle of curses. I was part of a cycle of trials. They had made me. They had erased me. They had written me over and over again. My knees weakened, but I refused to fall. The pen burned still in my grip, the golden threads of Pixel's ink coiling inside it like veins of fire. I turned it over, desperate to hold on to the only anchor that still belonged to me. And then, from the corner of the room, a soft sound broke through the cold hum of the machines. A weight landed gently on the polished floor, paws clicking faintly. I spun, and there he was. Pixel. Not molten ink, not a shadow of an anchor, but flesh and fur. His coat shimmered faintly as though catching a light I couldn't see. His eyes glowed a bright golden hue, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he blinked at me exactly the way he always had, ordinary and miraculous. Pixel, I whispered. My throat closed on the name. He padded toward me, tail curling high, and pressed against my shin. The warmth of him almost broke me. After everything, after the motel, after the library, after the rules carved into my skin, he was still here, still mine. I bent to scoop him up, desperate to hold him, but the screen above flickered again. The words shifted. Cycle 249 initiated. The air in the room dropped like a stone. The lab coats didn't flinch. They didn't speak. They only wrote on their clipboards, checking boxes, recording data. The hum of the machines deepened into a growl. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, before settling into a harsh glare. No, I whispered. No, it's finished. I ended it. I clutched Pixel closer, but the page in my other hand burned hot. The sentence I had written, Michael Brennan remembers, bled golden light, and new words began to crawl underneath it, letters that weren't mine. My pen shook violently, writing by itself, dragged by an unseen hand. I tried to resist, but the golden glow betrayed me, betraying Pixel too. On the page, the new line finished itself. Cycle continues with memory intact. The walls shivered. The machines beeped faster, louder, a rhythm like a countdown. My stomach dropped as reality itself warped around me. The white room stretched like elastic, bending into impossible angles. Doors opened where no doors had been, each one leading to familiar places. The motel hallway, the neon sign, the supply closet. Every rule I thought I had broken reappeared in black text along the walls, glowing faintly, waiting to be obeyed again. Pixel hissed, claws digging into my arm, his golden eyes wide with panic. He knew what I was only just realizing. The story hadn't ended. My choice hadn't closed the draft. All I had done was make the next cycle stronger, more complete. The library hadn't been destroyed. It had been moved, built here, inside the walls of this experiment. The screen updated again. Subject MB, final draft, accepted. And beneath it, in smaller type, another line appeared. Words so familiar they tore through me like a blade. You can't hide from what you've done. The room darkened, the lights bleeding into red. The lab coat stepped back into the shadows. A new door slid open at the far end of the room, its outline glowing like fire. I knew without needing to be told that it was waiting for me, the way every door in this cycle always had. Behind it, another night, another set of rules, another chance to remember, or fail. Pixel leapt from my arms and ran ahead, tail high, slipping through the doorway without hesitation. My heart wrenched, torn between terror and the inevitability of following. I tightened my grip on the pen, my last proof of choice, and stepped after him. The door swallowed me whole. As the world shifted again, the last thing I heard was the screen's final command. Cycle 249 initiated. Subject retains memory. And for the first time, I realized the ending I had written wasn't a conclusion at all. It was the beginning of the last rewrite,